Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
this was the worst 12 hours of my life. This is the first time I'm telling anyone the full story of what happened to me. I haven't told my partner, my therapist, my parents. No one knows the details. If there is anything that should be taken away from my story, it's this: remember that you don't need to be polite to everyone you meet. The setting: in October 2018, I was 18 and my first year at university in a big city in the United Kingdom. I had always lived in the countryside before this, so I was never very street smart. About a year before I went to university, I had started a relationship with this guy, Jimmy, who is now my ex. It was my first real relationship and I thought the world of him, but it was not reciprocated in a loving and compassionate way. Jimmy started off as very emotionally abusive and got progressively worse, but that's a whole other story. At this point, Jimmy and I had been together just under a year and had applied to universities in the same city mostly by coincidence, and both moved to the same city. I wanted to have a proper student life, so got accommodation in a student block on the other side of the city to him. Jimmy had been using drugs for quite a while, initially starting off just smoking weed, but this progressed rapidly, and by the time we were at university he was regularly doing a lot of hard drugs, plus smoking weed multiple times a day. Honestly, I don't think he was ever not high. When we moved to university, we still saw each other every couple of days, and he found a regular drug dealer, Mark, that he had been using continually since we got there in September. Jimmy used to buy from Mark multiple times a week, so on a handful of occasions I had briefly met him. Mark lived a lot closer to my student accommodation than to Jimmy's, so a couple of weeks before this all happened, Jimmy had started picking up drugs from Mark when he came to see me, meaning Mark would often be outside of my accommodation. Jimmy had asked me a few times if I would pick up the drugs he bought from Mark, but I had always felt weird speaking to Mark on my own. Plus, I rarely smoked weed, so it felt very weird picking up drugs in general. At 6 in the afternoon, at the end of October, Jimmy had plans to come and see me that evening and asked me again if I would pick up some weed from Mark. I was in a good mood that day and feeling more confident than usual, so for the first time I agreed to. Jimmy gave me Mark's number and said that Mark would message me when he was on his way. Only around 10 minutes later, I got a message from Mark saying that he was nearly outside my apartment and I needed to go outside, so I did. Outside of my accommodation there was a quieter area with a lot of benches, so I sat and waited for him. Behind me was only a wall and a small contained area that had all of the bins for the building. Out of nowhere, I felt someone's hands on my shoulders in a really weird, creepy way. I jumped, obviously, and realized it was Mark, who I barely recognized as I had only briefly seen him a couple of times. I realized now that my back had been to the wall at the bin storage, so he must have been waiting there. I was immediately on guard because of how he touched my shoulders, especially because I didn't know him, so shifted away from him as he sat down next to me. He began talking to me as if we were buddies, asking me a million questions about myself, like deeply personal questions. The whole time I was deflecting, not wanting to give out any information, so started asking him questions instead. He began a really deep monologue about himself and his life, where he openly told me he had just gotten out of prison a few months before. It was for some kind of violent crime. I engaged his ramblings, just nodding along, but still trying to get back to the whole point of just picking up drugs for my boyfriend. It reached 7. I have always been able to talk to anyone. It was always taught to be nice when someone is talking, so I ended up sitting there for around an hour trying to get the conversation back to the reason I was there, to pick up drugs for my boyfriend and go. It was so long it actually started getting dark. This guy just kept talking. I knew my boyfriend was going to be coming over soon, so I kept looking at my phone to see if he was on his way, but he hadn't replied. Eventually, I told Mark that I needed to get back inside as I was meeting up with my boyfriend soon, and then going clubbing after with some friends, so I needed to get ready, and could I please just pick up the drugs? He then said, "Oh, well, I can't give them to you here. There are cameras everywhere. We can go inside so that I can give them to you." I witnessed him giving my boyfriend drugs in this same spot countless times before, so knew this was a lie. I didn't want Mark to come back to my apartment, so told him that he could go into the lobby of my building where there was a disabled bathroom, and he could give them to me there. He agreed and followed me inside. We went into the bathroom. It was a very large room, so I didn't have to be too close to him, and he locked the door behind us. He then began fiddling with something in his pocket. I assumed the drugs, but instead pulled down his trousers fully and started peeing in the toilet. I was hugely freaked out. This guy just started peeing, but I rationalized that there was no way he had any other motive because he had met me and my boyfriend together, so he knew I was in a relationship. I figured he just really needed to pay. I had kept my eyes shut the whole time. time, and when he flushed I thought that finally he would give me the drugs that I was there to collect. This whole thing had been going on for about an hour and a half by this point. He said, "I really want to roll myself a joint, but there's no space in here to do it. Can I come and roll it on your desk and then I'll give you Jimmy's stuff?" I asked again if he could just give it to me now, and he said no, saying that I was being rude for not inviting him in. By this point I was wanting to get ready to go out with my friends later that evening and knew my boyfriend would be coming by any minute, so figured it'd be okay even though I didn't want this. It's worth noting that I was emotionally abused by my boyfriend and knew he would be mad at me if I didn't collect his drugs, or if I annoyed Mark because he was his favorite dealer. I honestly figured that Mark was harmless, despite him telling me he was a violent criminal, and just assured myself that he was only a bit creepy, it would be fine. It was now 8. Reluctantly, I took Mark up to my apartment, opened the door, and let him in. I said he had to roll his joint fast because I had to get ready. Finally, he gave me the drugs that my boyfriend wanted, so I felt better at that point. He walked over to my desk, moved all my things to the side, and sat down, getting out the things to roll his joint. I cannot roll a joint, but I've seen Jimmy do it countless times, so no, it doesn't take more than a minute or so. Mark keeps trying to talk to me, but at this point my answers are getting shorter and shorter. He rolls this joint so slowly I cannot even describe it. He then said, "Well, I can't smoke this outside, so is it cool if I just stay here and smoke it? It'll only take 5 minutes to smoke." I said no and told him again that I had to get ready. He replied, "It's okay, you can get ready with me here." By this point I was over it, messaged my boyfriend again to tell him to hurry up. Mark asked me again, and in my frustration and wanting this guy out of my apartment I just said okay sure, but be quick. I then went out of my room into the shared kitchen. I only had 2 flatmates and no one else was in the apartment that night, grabbed some wine and a glass so that I could have some solitary pre-drinks, and returned to my room. I sat for another 15 minutes being increasingly less polite, but he kept talking to me. I drank my first glass of wine pretty fast and just decided if Mark was going to take ages then I would just get ready to go out with my friends. I told him that as soon as he finished smoking he could just leave on his own, so I left him sat at my desk, took some clothes into the bathroom, and jumped into the shower. It was now night. Maybe a minute or so into my shower I heard some soft footsteps outside the door, and like a scene from a freaking horror movie, I saw the door handle slowly be pushed down. Thank the Lord I remembered to lock the door. All of a sudden Mark began banging on the door. I turned the shower off and just said hello through the door. He shouted through the door, asking me to let him in because he needed to pee again. I obviously said no and just got dried and dressed. Thankfully I took clothes to the bathroom as fast as I could. By this point I figured there was no way he was going to leave my apartment until I did, so I did my makeup as fast as I physically could and messaged my friends that I'd be coming to theirs sooner than I had planned. I still hadn't gotten a reply from my boyfriend, so I just told him that I was going out early and not to come over. I got ready to go and told Mark that I was leaving now and he needed to come downstairs with me. He was still sat at my desk and ignored what I was saying. He asked if he could stay in my room while I was out because he was tired and wanted a nap. Finally, I was firm with him, and after a lot of convincing he left with me. I made sure to order an Uber to my friend's place so that he couldn't try and walk with me, and by the time we got outside my Uber was nearly there. He stood with me, looking over my shoulder at my phone the whole time. Then the Uber arrived, I got into it, and Mark straight up walked around the other side and got in. I was in disbelief and laughed, then told the Uber driver that I didn't know who this guy was, and that he wasn't getting in with me. The Uber driver was not as polite as me and told Mark to get out, and he did. It was now 10. I sat there on the way to my friend's house and finally felt calm that I had gotten away from Mark. I called my friend from the Uber and told her what happened, so she said she would come outside of her building to get me with a group of her flatmates. My friend's accommodation was not far from mine and took longer to get to by car than on foot because of the one-way system in the city, but I didn't care at this point. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes later I arrived, and my friend came over to my Uber, then brought me back to her group of friends. She had quite a few people with her, and I suddenly noticed that one of her male flatmates was talking to someone slightly away from the group. I looked over and suddenly realized he was talking to Mark. I guess he was looking at the address when I had the Uber app open earlier. I whispered to my friend, and she freaked out and went inside with me straight away. I was super freaked out that this guy wouldn't just leave me alone. He refused to leave my side for the last few hours, and now he had followed me to my friend's house. Honestly, I felt much safer now, and met a few creeps in my time, so just decided to get over it by having a nice time with my friend. So we sat in her kitchen having a chat and some drinks. It was now 11. After a while talking explaining to her I almost forgot what had happened just an hour ago and was getting increasingly tipsy from the wine. The kitchen door opened and her male flatmate comes inside announcing that he invited a guy who had given him free weed. You guessed it, Mark walked in. Mark addressed me by name and walked over, putting his hands around my waist from behind. I get pretty confident when I drink, so I had no problem pushing him off me and announcing to everyone in a jokey way, yeah, this is the guy who has been following me around all evening. I don't know him. Even in this room with all of my friends' flatmates, I still didn't feel safe. He stayed away from me, looking at me for a while from the other side of the kitchen, and I just ignored him. My friend could tell I was uncomfortable, so suggested we go and drink in her room. Around 30 minutes after going into her room, the door slams open suddenly, and Mark is standing there. He says, oh, I was looking for the bathroom, can I use yours? She tells him to get the out, and he does. I'm honestly just bored of this guy's constant presence at this point, so we decide to just go to the club early. It's now 12. We grab our stuff, run past the kitchen door and outside. My friend orders us an Uber, and we get in and go to the club. After a while, some of her flatmates join us, but Mark does not. Thank the Lord. The people who had been in the kitchen said that Mark left shortly after he saw me and my friend leave, but there was no sign of him now. I just try and enjoy the night, but being a poor student, I can't afford any more drinks at the club. As I begin to sober up, I realize how shaken up and creeped out the whole evening made me, and I don't feel safe. It's now 2 at night. After only a couple of hours, I decide that I just want to go home and sleep because this whole experience freaked me out. I take an Uber back, use my key card to get into my apartment building, go upstairs and into my apartment. I stare getting ready for bed, put on some pajamas and started taking off my makeup. All of a sudden, I heard a loud knock on my door. I had no clue who it was, but since it was still early for a Friday night, I thought my boyfriend maybe finally decided to show up. My door didn't have a peephole, so I walked to the door in my pajamas, unlocked it planning to open it a tiny bit to see who it was, and then the door flew open so fast that I was pushed backwards into my apartment and then shoved into my room, which was directly across from the front door. In my panic, I froze, then looked up only to realize that Mark was now standing in my apartment. The realization started to sink in. Mark had just forced his way into my room, and I was trapped here with him. He was visibly angry and very high. He locked the door behind him and began rambling about how I was so rude for not inviting him in with my friends, for ignoring him, for not letting him in the Uber. I was terrified, so ran over to my bed and grabbed my phone. He walked over behind me and began grabbing me, touching me as much as he could, so I shouted at him to get off. He saw my phone in my hand and immediately smiled and told me to open the camera. I was terrified, so did as he said, and he said he wanted a picture of us together. I did as I was told and took a selfie with him while he posed with his arms around me and then kissing my cheek and my neck. He then screamed at me to unlock my phone, so I did. He made me open up my messages and send Jimmy the selfie of me and Mark sat next to each other on my bed, so I did. He waited for it to send and then grabbed my phone and put it down on the desk. He sat at my desk for the next 4 to 5 hours, talking at me continually, saying how I was so rude, I needed someone to teach me some manners, how I had to do what he said because he was older than me, how Jimmy wasn't good enough for me, how I was so beautiful and how he knew that I needed to be with him. He told me that his girlfriend knew he had been at my house that evening and now she said he can't go home, and it was all my fault. The whole time I continued bargaining with him, trying to get him to leave, but it didn't work. Occasionally I would just lie down on my bed or sit and not speak. Each time I did, he would get up and wrap his arms around me or try and spoon me, stroking my face, trying to kiss me, and trying to take my clothes off and touch me. Every time I fought him off, and he would get angry again and go and sit at the desk and keep shouting. I knew that this guy has previously been in prison for some kind of violent crime, so I did not want to piss him off. I just sat there for hours and quietly sobbed, too scared of trying to leave because I would have had to walk past him to get to the door. I was out of options. I didn't know if I could get out without angering him. I couldn't call the police because he had my phone. My flatmates weren't, so my screams meant nothing. It was now 6 in the morning, and while he was sat at my desk, he kept smoking more weed or taking a line of whatever drug, so was becoming more and more out of it. He was becoming more sleepy as he smoked more weed, until I was able to speak between his ramblings, so I gently said I was going to the bathroom. I noticed he had his eyes partially closed and figured I only had one chance, so I took the opportunity and grabbed my phone off the desk as fast as I could, unlocked the door and ran out the apartment. The one thing I will always remember is being in tears, pressing the button for the elevator to come probably about 50 times because I was so scared that he was going to come after me. As I got into the elevator, I heard him come out of my apartment, shouting my name, but the elevator doors closed as he looked at me. I was able to get downstairs and out the building. I ran around the corner of the building in my pajamas and manically dialed the number for the police, told them what happened and that this guy had been in prison until recently, and next thing I knew around 5 police cars showed up. I was in such a state and called my boyfriend to tell him what happened. He was still awake and hadn't come to visit the night before because he was with a girl who was a friend, and said that now he didn't want to come to be with me because he had some weed on him and didn't want to be near the police. I told him to get to my place right now, and he reluctantly did. This is the aftermath. The police had to force entry to my apartment because Mark had locked himself in and barricaded the door. They arrested him and he ended up going to prison for drug charges, but not for what he did and tried to do to me. The police said they couldn't prosecute him because I had willingly let him into my apartment earlier in the night, and he hadn't physically done anything. After I had given my statements to the police, I went back inside to see that after I had escaped, my room was trashed. Mark had thrown things around and smashed things in anger. I'm so glad I got out when I did because I can't imagine what would have happened if I was trapped in the crossfire. I don't know what happened to Mark after that, but I moved out of that apartment a couple of months later and away from that city as soon as I could when the pandemic hit, to make sure Mark could never find me. I actually stayed in my abusive relationship for another year or so until I realized that I was too good to put up with Jimmy's stuff. I couldn't go outside for months after, which messed up the whole of my first year at university. It has taken until now for me to be able to walk around at night, and being alone in public is still really difficult. If you take one thing away from this, stop being so polite. I was raised to be nice to everyone, and I realize now that being polite worsened everything. I wish I had never been polite enough to pick up drugs for my ex, or polite enough to let Mark into my apartment when he begged. So to Mark, let's not meet again. When I was a kid, my mom worked as a teacher and she was very close to a co-worker of hers who had a son around my age and of whom I, as well, was very close. When my mom or her friend would head out for the night, the other would take care of both of us kids, and basically it meant I spent half my time over there, and my friend spent half his time at my house, which was perfect and fun for us. We lived in different cities, but since that kind of system had been going on pretty much since forever, I grew up knowing my friend's city just as well as mine. His mom was well aware of that, so that being said, whenever we were going on a walk in their area, she'd let us wander around because she knew we'd always find our way back to her. My mom, though, was more cautious and always kept an eye on us, as she'd walk behind us to make sure she'd always be able to see us. I just wish her friend would have done the same. And one day, I had to be around 6 or 7 years old. We were going on a walk with my friend Marcus and his mom Katie. It was a very sunny day and I was wearing a dress with embroidered flowers and I had my blonde, long hair down. I often heard I was a pretty kid, even from strangers in the street, and besides making me and my parents somewhat uncomfortable, nothing bad ever happened. During that walk, Katie was walking ahead of us and I was chatting and just fooling around with Marcus when he suddenly remembered something urgent to tell his mom, as urgent as something could be for an 8-year-old boy. He ran up to her and left me strolling behind for a couple of minutes, just as it already had happened 100 times prior. That time though, we were circling around a big camping site and we walked by the white vans and camping cars. One of those vans had its back doors open and there was a man, probably in his mid-40s, smoking a cigarette and leaning on the vehicle. He locked eyes with me as I was approaching, then saw that Katie and Marcus weren't paying much attention to me as they were already a couple of meters ahead. Then he proceeded to pull me by my arm close to him, and so I found myself with my body touching his. So weirded out that I didn't even say a word, although I knew Katie would have heard me if I called for help. He leaned toward me as he was obviously much taller than I was, muttering something I didn't get, and he winked at me and kissed me on the lips and then pulled me to the open doors of his van. At this point, if he had pushed me just a little, I would have fell in the truck. At this point, I just was too scared to even lift a finger, and even though I didn't understand everything that was going on, I knew it wasn't alright. He put his hands on the doors as to close the vehicle and I felt my heart sink. At that exact moment, some other man jogged towards us, in his 40s as well, waving hello to me and saying something along the lines of "I lost sight of you for a bit." I was so scared. He had a very friendly look on his face and was staring at me with great insistence and with a huge reassuring smile. And the van man awkwardly laughed and yanked me out of the way of the car, slamming the door shut. I ran to Katie as I heard the van go off and just acted as if nothing had happened. To this day, I never told that story to anyone, not to Katie or Marcus, not to my mom, nobody. I am 22 years old today, so to the friendly guy who obviously didn't lose sight of me or whatever but just probably saw everything and wanted to interfere, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. To the guy who surely would have abducted me and who was strangely okay with kissing a kid in public and in broad daylight, I'm not even in the mood to add anything to what happened, but everyone thinks the same thing as I do and I wish you the worst, and let's not ever meet again. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. This happened a few weeks ago. I work at a petrol station. I have years experience in a previous one, so getting this job was just piece of cake, I guess. Only this was different. It's low working. Can you imagine 8 hours entirely by yourself, especially doing late shifts? So my shift started early afternoon. About maybe half an hour into my shift, this guy walks in. I seen him before as he entered the shop the day before and randomly asked me if I had any shopping bags to spare. The guy was giving me some uncomfortable vibes, but luckily someone else was working with me that day for a short while, so I asked them to deal with that guy. My colleague said we don't have anything to spare you and told him bye. The guy leaves. Anyway, back to this very day, that guy walks in and I thought, what does he want now? Another handout. Of course, he just walks up to the desk and just starts chatting to me. He was asking me some advice about his living situation as he told me he used to be homeless. Since to me it's not really my place to give advice, plus I just really didn't want to be stuck talking to this guy, I just shrugged and told him to just sleep on it and have a think about things. And of course he left. He didn't enter the store to buy anything at all, just a chat, but thinking back I remembered that he asked me what time I got off and stupidly told him 11 at night. I got on with my shift as usual up until 9:30 at night. He returns, but with another guy who may I say look dodgy. All dressed in black, hood up. The guy who entered the shop previously pokes his head into the door and asked if I do phone top-ups. We do, but something in my gut was telling me make him leave now. So I lied and told him we do not. So the guy and his dodgy friend hang outside the store for a bit while I was serving customers then until the shop seemed quiet again. They both entered the store and would look like they were looking all around the shop. I noticed the dodgy guy kept his hands in his pockets the whole time, and then that thought struck me, I'm getting robbed tonight. So I took some deep breaths and tried to keep calm and just thought of my training. I repeated in my head, just comply, give them what they want, then call police after they leave. But of course from the panic I thought to myself, better plan, so I stood ready with one hand under the desk hovering over the panic button. I thought to myself, the minute they pull a weapon out on me, hit the button as it's a silent alarm and show hands and comply and hope police arrive on time to catch them. Well, they just ended up buying a bottle of water, as of course I did notice there was someone still outside in their car. I felt a huge sigh of relief thinking they just wanted water or they decided not to rob me because there's another person outside. They both leave the store but again hang around outside right by the door. Then I see the car drive away and I thought to myself, I don't want these guys in the store again, not while I'm completely alone. So I flipped the switch that automatically locks the main door. Half an hour passes. I had no customers and still the two guys are still hanging around outside. I called my boss to tell him what's going on and to give him a heads up that at some point I'm going to have to call the police and have them move them along as it's making me very anxious. Then another guy shows up and joins the guys all dressed in black and wearing masks. He also hands his friends masks too, then he makes his way around the back of the store. Then I realized the back door, the one I go out from to puff on my vape. I ran to the back door, slammed it shut and locked it. At this point I was scared for my life as these guys stack around the place to which felt like an hour and a half. I hid in the office watching the cameras. I picked up the phone and dialed the non-emergency number for the police. At this point I was really freaking out, but of course I had to listen carefully while a bit on the phone was going through those. Press 1 for this. I couldn't focus as the next thing a colleague calls me on my mobile to check in on me. I told him what's happening, then I came out the office to take a peek, and of course those guys were right up to the window knocking to grab my attention. And yes, they saw me with 2 phones to my ears. They saw me. I said to my colleague on the phone that I came up with an idea. I put the phone I had making a call to the police down and kept my colleague on the phone. I said, listen, I'm going to see what they want. Stay on the phone. I'm going to put you on speaker. Stay quiet. Don't say a word. Just listen. If you hear me say the store is slow, you hang up and call the police. I mean it, that's me telling you I'm in danger. So I put him on speaker and hide my phone in my bra. I head to the window. What's up guys? Can I help you? Guy, why is the door locked? That's because we're in night mode now. Door's locked but I can surf through the hatch. What can I get you? They just look at each other and whisper amongst themselves. Guy, we'll just take some smokes and a lighter. Sure, 1 moment. I grab what they ask for and they push a $20 note through. I quickly grab the 20 and of course check it. Then I rang them up, but as I had their change ready I saw one hand through the hatch. I dropped their change into that hand, avoiding contact. Okay, thank you, bye now. I stared them down. They finally leave for good. As soon as they were gone I fell to the floor and burst out crying after holding in that fear for so long. I demanded that my shifts are to be changed to morning shifts after that night or I'm quitting. In my late teens and early 20s, I was friends with a girl named Lucy. She was a very lonely kind of girl whose parents were, well honestly, really bad parents. Her mother was verbally abusive and her father really couldn't care less about anything. Because of the lack of love in her life, Lucy searched through dating sites for love and comfort from strange men, and she was not afraid of meeting them face to face even if they'd been chatting for only a few days. My friendship with Lucy was a strange one. I found her quite annoying sometimes, but I also felt awful for her because of her loneliness and lack of friends and love in her life. Sometimes I really didn't want to hang out with her, and some days I would accept her offer to hang out. When it was just her and I together, she was normal and okay to be around, but also very appreciative of having someone giving her attention. We had a small group of friends and she would try to get all of us together as often as possible, and honestly, the whole group together was really quite fun. When we were all together, Lucy was very hyper and you could just tell that she was happy to be around people who didn't insult her as her mother does. Suddenly, Lucy tells us she has a boyfriend. We were all surprised because we knew she met a lot of guys online, but we had never heard her say she was dating someone. A few days later, she sets up a day for our friend group to meet Trevor. None of us were looking forward to it because we thought he was going to be like all the others, a temporary boy toy. When we met him, we all felt awkward. He barely spoke a word. He wouldn't look directly at any of us at all. Lucy would try to be funny, but he would just give her dirty looks. Needless to say, we thought he was a weird one and could tell he didn't care much for her. As the days went on, Lucy kept telling me how much Trevor did not like me. This was weird because no one ever disliked me. I am always polite, respectful, and I smile a lot at everyone, but for some reason, he did not like me. She kept saying he thinks I abuse Lucy for her money. Not sure how he thought that since I paid for everything for Lucy. To keep this piece of the story short, I think he was trying to find reasons to convince her to get rid of me. I got a terrible vibe from Trevor. He dressed like he didn't care about life. He never smiled. He didn't shake our hands when first meeting us. He stank of weed and really had an overall uncomfortable feeling about him. After months of Trevor trying to convince Lucy that I am a terrible friend and she should not hang out with me anymore, she started to do as he said. She would start to hide me from him. If she and I were together and he would call her on her phone, she would lie and say I wasn't there. If she was with a group of friends, he would never swear I wasn't there. When he was going to be joining the group on an outing or just hanging out at her place, she would tell me I couldn't come. Lucy will do whatever a boyfriend says just to keep pleasing him so she doesn't lose him. Now here's where it gets scary. Lucy calls me one day and says she wants me to come hang out at her place. I agreed. She came to pick me up. We went to her house and watched television for a bit. We then decided since it's a nice day outside, we would take her two dogs for a walk to a nearby pocket park and would later return to the house to have lunch together. While at this park, she receives a phone call. Now, let me say that Lucy is not a private person whatsoever and has never ever walked away to answer a phone call until this day. She walked far enough away that she knew I would not be able to hear anything she said. This was suspicious to me, but not enough to question it. The call ends as she begins walking toward me with a look on her face as if she is trying not to smile. She tells me, "So, I need to bring you home now." I was slightly confused as we had only been together for about an hour when we usually spend the entire day together. She would never wanted me to go home. She would even frequently beg me to sleep over to avoid being alone. So anyway, I said okay and we walked to drop off her dogs at home and we got into her car and off we went. About 10 minutes into the car ride, I realized she isn't going in the direction of my house, so I questioned it. "Where are we going?" She smirked but didn't respond. I asked again, laughing uncomfortably. "Seriously, where are we going?" She continued to smirk but didn't want to answer me. I started to realize she was heading in the direction of where her boyfriend lived. "Oh no." I asked one last time with anger in my voice, "Where are you taking me?" Her only response was bone-chilling to me. "Trevor wants to talk to you." Nope, I wasn't having any of this. I insisted and demanded she let me out of the car, but with her evil smirk and same response, she said it again, "It's okay. He just wants to talk to you." I was furious at this point because this creepy guy who looks like he wants to kill someone, who also despised me, wanted to talk to me. Why can't he talk to me on the phone? Why do I need to go to his sketchy apartment? She absolutely refused to let me out of the car. She had the doors locked, as if I wasn't able to unlock my passenger door. I waited until she reached a red light. I grabbed her wallet from the back seat and took out her bus pass and bolted out of the car. I had no idea where I was or where the nearest bus stop was, but I was not about to let her crazy boyfriend do whatever he wanted to me. She yelled for me to get back into the car, but of course, I ignored her. She sped off furiously. I immediately blocked her number on my phone. I removed her as my friend on social media and immediately warned the group of friends not to talk to her because she has gone nuts. I have not spoken to her since that very day, and she also lost the other 5 friends of the group as well. After this situation, Lucy, I hope you're truly lonely now. I have a more or less unusual story that I would like to tell you. I have a clear memory of it. It takes place last year, in 2021. I was often driving back and forth from Montreal to Quebec City for my work and to see my family. It was late because I was driving almost at night, around 7. I was not on a highway but on a national road, not very busy, surrounded by forests and plains. I didn't mind driving at night because I had good vision and little fatigue, but halfway to my goal, in the distance, in the middle of the road, I realized that there was someone crouched down. who seemed afraid. I was close to a town, so seeing a person didn't seem strange. Obviously, I wasn't going to run over him. I stopped on the side. I realized that it was a woman about my age who was crying. I go to her and ask her if she is safe, if she is feeling well. After a few minutes of silence, she ended up telling me in a feverish tone that she was being followed and that she was very afraid. I didn't know what to do. The stress was building up. This had never happened to me on this road. I stayed close to her, but I could hear footsteps behind us coming up the side of the road. At first, it was just a vague and distant shadow from my point of view, then a silhouette of a tall, thin man. My brain quickly understood that this was the person the girl was afraid of, but she was paralyzed, still crouching, so I took her in my arms and put her in my car to take her to the nearest police station, so at least she would be safe and have a roof over her head for the night. I then started the engine and continued driving normally, but in the central rear view mirror, I could see the man more precisely. He was standing and not moving. He was dressed in an untidy way. To my astonishment, he got down on all fours as an animal would until the distance cut me off from his view. After this story, which was quite frightening at the time, I took the young woman back to a Quebec station and explained the situation. After a few days, I was able to get some information. This woman, who if I may give an anecdote is my companion today, fortunately I took this road that day. She had broken down in the middle of the road. The man had come to talk to her and offered to help her and invite her to his house. She refused, finding the man aggressive and insistent, but the man was not satisfied. He started to grab her hand and she started to struggle and run. I found her after she had run ahead of the man. She was having a panic attack at that time. The man then followed her until I saved her, as she says today. In retrospect, I didn't expect this man to want to hurt her. After all, maybe he was used to taking women to his house. Fortunately, my partner didn't go into his house a year ago. Maybe he was going to hurt her. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.